Yeah, so I've been part of Calvary Chapels for my whole ministry life. I went to Calvary Chapel Bible College in 1998, 99. And so we planted Calvary Chapel churches. And so, over the years, it's just kind of, things have changed a little bit. But Calvary Global Network is right up my alley because there's a real heart and emphasis for planting churches. And you mentioned that that goal of 1,000 churches in 10 years. And I just had someone ask me the other day, how can you plant 1,000 churches in 10 years? Well, you have to remember Calvary Chapel and Calvary Global Network, there's a lot of churches out there that are part of the network. Yeah. There's over 1,700 churches, I think, at this point, and around that number. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I told this guy who was asking me, I said, listen, first of all, what do you mean by when you say plant a church? Does that mean that we have to be at a church that has a steeple and has a property and has, like we kind of know in the Western world? Mm-hmm. Not at all. Churches are being planted in India. That means there's 25, 30 people in a home, someone's home, with a couple of elders. They have communion together. They baptize people. They do evangelism. Yeah. They have a structure, but it's not that official kind of building and stuff like we have here. So that's a church. That's part of that number. Secondly, there's a bunch of churches in the network right now. And if every church, even at this very moment, if every church right now, and I haven't shared this with anybody with our Cultivate crew or anything, but I thought this the other day. When he asked me, if every church in the network would commit to planting at least, one or two churches over the next 5 to 10 years, think of the impact that we could have. Not to mention those churches that are in those areas like, Southeast Asia, India, where I just did a conference with Jeff Gipe on Zoom to Indian pastors in India.
And he was just over there 2 months ago at a CGN conference with 25 pastors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So these guys are they'll just go to a conference and then 50 new churches are planted. Just like that. I mean, it's like I brought my brother and his friend. They're going to start churches in their houses too because, there's persecution in a lot of those areas.
Of course, yeah. So
they'll have a network of church leaders. So what we would call as kind of a multi-site thing, that's a Western kind of thing.
Yeah.
They would say these are churches, and then they'll have pastors or elders that oversee 10, 20, 30 churches at a time.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about that because that was a little bit of your experience in Uganda, right? As far as you not only planted a church in Uganda, but you sent out a lot of guys. Just give me a little history and talk about that just for us to know it can be done. Micro churches, whatever you want to call it, or different ways of doing church, but the gospel is the power of God to save. It works in these areas. And talk about how you were in the city and then people from the villages came and then went back out. What is that like?
Good. Yeah, so we were in Uganda for 10 years and we went over. I was 23, my wife was 22, so we were young. We had a 1-year-old and my wife was pregnant.
Nice.
Oh man, that was another day. That was another day for sure. But we went over there and we went with a lead pastor who had this vision to plant the church and everything. So we're like, yeah, right on. And I mentioned this in my leadership lesson, but he ended up coming back to the States for various reasons. But I became the pastor kind of by default. That's how I became a pastor at age 24.
Yeah.
And
what a blessing.
What a blessing. I didn't know what I was doing, but I loved God. I loved his word. And what we found, to answer your question, in the city, so we were in Kampala, which is the capital city, 2 to 4 million people, basically, in that city area. The way it works in Uganda and many other African countries and also many other, developing nation countries is you'll have the capital city that has international trade. That's where the money can be made. So what these families will do from the villages are out remotely. They don't have a lot of, many don't have running water, they don't have power. They'll send the young men and young women into the cities to make money, to go to college, university, and that sort of thing. And then what happens is those kids will then send that support back out to their villages. What we found was that when we started this church, we started also a Bible college, Calvary Chapel Bible College Extension Campus. And these students would then go back out to their villages and want to replicate what we were doing in the city as far as the Calvary Chapel church that we were doing.
Yeah.
So they would plant churches in their villages. Some of them would meet under a tree. You know what I mean? They had no steeple.
Yeah.
They didn't even have pews. They didn't have chairs. They made these mats that they would weave together,
Uh-huh.
and they would sit under the tree, literally. And so someone asked us the other day, I'm part of this Cultivate church planting program, hey, can we be a Calvary Chapel? Can we be a CGN church if we don't have a building, if we just meet under a tree? And the answer is, yeah, of course you can, as long as you hang the Calvary dove right on that from one of the branches like an ornament.
Or just
like
tattoo it to your arm.
Like, yeah, you
in,
tattoo
right?
it, then wherever you go, man,
man.
that's Calvary Chapel.
Yeah.
Chuck Smith.
That's amazing. How many churches did you actually plant from that sort of hub or that model?
Yeah, so they're still going strong. There's a local Ugandan pastor now that pastors that church. His name's Zeddy Mzungu, and they are still planting churches. But when we were there were probably around 15 or 20 that had gone out from there. And then they're also, it's hard to gauge, because in these countries, it's not like, in America, we're so good. We can just, I don't know if it's a good thing, but we can get all the spreadsheets and all the numbers and, here's a church, here's where they're located, here's the address, that's one.
Yeah.
But there, it's like, you'll have a couple guys go to a village and they'll start Bible studies that become churches, and those will start other ones. So it's almost like a very organic, like you said, kind of a micro church type of scenario where they're still getting direction and leadership in many cases from the local pastor that's sent out, but there's multiple churches and congregations that are happening. And that's how it's places like China, places like India, that's how it's really spreading. And in Uganda when we were there too, so.